We are running a little bit late, so may I start the session, our Net Impact luncheon meeting today. I'm very honored to introduce you to Peter Dupont from Nexant, who I had the privilege to interview last year for a research paper on energy efficiency. I had no idea about EE or energy efficiency before last year, and it was amazing to interview so many people and especially Peter to find out that it's such an important subject, especially for sustainability going forward. So I'd like to introduce Peter to you. He's been here for more than 20 years in Thailand, and he has more than 25 years of experience in developing sustainable energy and efficiency programs in both the US and in Asia. So without much further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Peter's talk, Energy Efficiency, a Sign of Personal Virtue or an Untapped Business Opportunity.
Okay.
Please welcome Peter.
Testing. Can you hear me okay? Is that okay, the sound? Yeah? Okay. So I have a lot of slides. I'm going to go through them fairly quickly. There's a lot of charts and data, and I'm going to just start with this theme about virtue or is this actually a good public policy and a business opportunity. So Vice President Dick Cheney made this famous statement, and it's a funny statement because it got a lot of negative attention in the press. But actually, what is wrong? Actually, energy conservation should be a virtue. Right? But the reason this got so much attention because he was saying, actually this is something that only people who want to be holier than thou do. Normal people can't do it, and that's basically bunkum. So it is the basis for a sound policy, and in my view, energy efficiency should be the first fuel before you build any power plants, and I'll provide some data on that. So I'm going to start with the funnies. I have some cartoons, some silly cartoons. And then I'm going to talk about, just briefly introduce the topic. And I'm going to spend about half of this talk, which will be about 20 minutes, talking about not energy efficiency, but the energy picture in this region. So you have an idea of where the energy is coming from and what the trends are. Then I'm going to talk about energy efficiency and the opportunity that it represents. And I should point out that the lights in this room are very inefficient. If you put in LED lights to replace these halogens, you would save about probably 60%. And it starts there with every room you're in, with every light that you buy. That's what energy efficiency is. It's not something you can just buy in a store and install. I'm going to talk about Thailand's 5 conservation power plants, which it's a well-kept secret. Thailand is building lots of plants, but they've already built 2,600 megawatts of power plants that are energy efficiency power plants. And then I'm going to end with some ideas about how we can seize this potential. So this is straight out of the labs. Nexant has a Firefly efficiency lab. We retrofitted the Firefly on the left with a coiled, compact fluorescent lamp, and it saves 75%. This is an example, just a funny one on technological overkill. The guy is sitting there, and he's got his whole surround sound, and he's watching a program on how to save energy. And this is, I really like this one because the problem with reductionism, it's like, do we do anything on global warming or not? Is global warming real or not? And this shows all of the benefits from clean energy, okay? And then multiple benefits. And then what if it's a big hoax and we create a better world for nothing? Okay, so my company is a company, it's a spin-off of Bechtel. We have about 700 people. We do consulting and software in the energy sector. We have software that operates grids. We have software that utilities use. We have software for chemical plants to look at value added as they expand their plants. And I work in the consulting side. We consult across the full range of energy sources and technologies. Okay, so energy efficiency pays for itself, okay? But people don't do it, okay? And most energy efficiency, like if you took these lamps and you replaced them with LEDs, you probably would have a 2-year payback or something like that. So that's, you got a 40% rate of return. Okay? People invest in you put money in the bank now, you get about 2%. So why is this $20 bill lying on the ground? And the answer is the challenge to get that $20 bill to be able to be picked up is to monetize the benefits in a way that people can easily understand. So I'll come back to that. So these are some charts showing the growth of population and the red line is developed countries, the blue line is developing countries. So a couple of interesting trends. In 2012, just coming up in a few years, the number of people in developing countries will be greater than the number of people in developed countries. That's not a surprise. But an interesting thing is that in 2010 was an inflection point where the amount of energy used in developing countries for the first time exceeded the amount of energy used by energy hogs like the US. And so how do we make sense of this graph? This basically shows that as GDP increases, people use more energy on average. So that's sort of intuitive, right? People, your incomes go up, you buy more stuff, okay? So, however, if you look at any one level of income, like USA and Japan, at about close to $40,000 per year income, Japan uses half as much energy as the US. Italy uses about half as much energy as Canada. Okay, so there's wide variations. Now, yes, it's true, Canada uses energy because it's cold and they have big distances. But what this chart shows is that that the level of income is not a predeterminant of how much energy you use. Okay, so this is the big conundrum for how we make the world a sustainable place in terms of energy. You have the U.S. energy hog using about, levels is tons of energy per person, okay? And so the U.S. is at about 7 or 8. And you have the developed Asian economies that are about 4 or 5. And you have a range of developing economies here between, say, 1/2 up to 2, okay? So if everyone uses as much energy as the U.S., we're screwed. Okay, I think people know that. So in my view, the point where we will become sustainable is if you reduce this level down to somewhere around 2 or 3. Okay? And some people say it's even less, but that means that the U.S. has to become about 70% more efficient than it is now. Okay. This is a pretty amazing graph because this basically shows that most of the countries in developing Asia are importing almost all of their oil. It's not surprising, but when you see it like this, and you see the trends, it is sort of alarming. So Thailand imports about 60% of its oil as of 2007, and that will go up to about 90%. Okay? And a lot of the government policy is geared towards saving energy in order to reduce this bill, which is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Then you have a country like Indonesia, which until 2006 was a member of OPEC. Okay, then if you're not exporting, you can't be OPEC, you become OPEC, Organization of Petroleum Importing Countries. So this trend, and by 2030, about 80% of the oil is going to be coming from the Middle East, which raises real security concerns. Okay. This is basically showing that about the share of energy used in developing Asia is going to be about 40% by 2030. Again, not a surprise, but just so you can see some of the underlying data. Now, this is projections based on plans for where this new energy is coming from. Okay, so is there a silver bullet? Well, not really. The status quo is that about 70% of the energy that is expected to power our economies in developing Asia, and this basically means South Asia, Southeast Asia, China, and the stands, Central Asia, it's going to come from coal and oil and gas. Nuclear will play a role, And under current plans, biomass and other sorts of waste energy is pretty small. Okay? So it's not likely that we will become carbon-free by 2030. There's talk about becoming carbon-free by 2050. But you can see that the plan, by 2030, we still have a very small share of energy that is quote-unquote clean energy. Now, I put this up here because people like to say, oh, well, the only way to go is nuclear because no one wants coal plants and they're hard to cite. So this is a fact that the nuclear renaissance, the supposed nuclear renaissance, is not really happening. And it will not happen unless a lot of policies change and the financial picture changes. So what is happening, this is the percentage of electricity provided globally. It's gone from 17% down to about 11%. So we actually have less nuclear power, electricity from nuclear as a share of total electricity production than we had in the, say, mid-90s. So right now it's at 11, okay? And this is the total amount of production. So even though there are more plants being built, there's so many plants, old plants that are being retired, and it's so hard and it takes so long to build new plants that it's not, if nuclear was going to take care of the problem, this graph would have to be going up like this, and it's not, and it will not. And my main reason why it will not is because the bankers will not finance it, utilities will not take the risk. Okay, just to give you an idea of the share of renewables, in terms of capacity added, even though the total amount of energy was pretty small in that chart I showed you, about half of new capacity is renewables, which is pretty remarkable. Yet the amount of actually energy generated is about 26%. And this is for electricity, by the way. It excludes other fuels. This is just electricity. Okay. So there's so much investment going into renewable energy, and part of what I wanted to do today is get you excited about energy efficiency, because it's so boring compared to windmills or solar plants, And this shows the level of investment in renewable energy just going up, and most of it, again in 2010, for the first time, the amount of renewable energy investments in developing countries exceeded that in developed countries. So the new markets are Thailand, India, China for building renewable energy. Now, there's an interesting thing here which is happening, which is that if this is the amount in billions of dollars of wind and solar. More than half of the solar is distributed. And this is a whole different way of looking at energy, developing an energy system. This is basically rooftop solar. Okay? In fact, Thailand, they've been building all these solar farms. They just passed or are about to pass legislation that will facilitate putting solar onto rooftops, which I think will be a very, very good thing. A German person told me one time that investing in solar is a really, really great investment because not only do you get the power, but you get 2 voters, okay, or 4 voters, depending on, usually if they're kids, the kids don't vote. But when you put solar panels on houses, you get 2 voters who support clean energy and the agenda of clean energy and sustainable energy. Okay, so this is, I call this the dreaded energy efficiency gap. Okay? The IEA has done a scenario of what the future will look like and how we can limit global warming to a 2 degrees centigrade increase. Okay? And the way to do that is you have to basically replace fossil fuels with clean energy. And in their scenarios, you have to reduce by about from 40 gigatons per year to about 26. Okay? So these are CO2 emissions. So that's what happens if we do nothing, and we have to reduce all of this fossil fuel, reduce fossil fuels in order to reduce CO2 to stabilize the climate. Okay? So how do we do this? Now, IEA says that we do this, we get anywhere from 66% and going down to 57% from energy efficiency. And most of that from end use. So the difference is end use is you change the light bulbs, power plants efficiency, you make the generation more efficient. Okay? Now, under current scenarios, this is impossible. Okay? Because currently only about 1 to 10% in that range, and usually it's close to 1 to 2% of new power is being provided by energy efficiency. So we're not going nearly, I mean, this is just a pipe dream, and we really need an Apollo program for energy efficiency to make this happen. This is basically showing that, in terms of development sector lending, they just don't get it. The amount of development assistance that's going to clean energy is very small. It's on the order of 25%, okay? 25, 30%. So they're starting to get it. Asian Development Bank is now investing about $2 billion a year in clean energy, but that's much less than is being invested in all of the traditional fossil sources. Okay, so I have some charts here. We'll just show you how much you can save, and based on real practice. And I won't go into too much detail because we don't have that much time, but in the US, you have basically policies that promote energy efficiency. Now this line is the average US electricity use, number of kilowatt hours per person per year. Okay? Now, you have an experiment. You have all of the US and you have California, which has very progressive policies. Okay? Because of those policies, the average person in California uses about 35 to 40% less energy. Okay? Now, that's very clear, and it didn't used to be that way. Okay? It diverged because after the oil crises in the 1970s, California started implementing policies. So that's just a very clear example. Now, how do they do that? Basically, you make stuff more efficient. I talked about the lights. Australia, just through labeling and standards, they made their refrigerators about 70% more efficient in over a 25-year period. The U.S. has done some great work in standards. Now the problem is the red line. Okay, but first I'll talk about the blue line. The blue line is the average electricity use of a refrigerator in the U.S., which has gone down about more than 2/3. Okay. The problem is that the average size of refrigerators has gone up and up and up. And so the average size of a refrigerator in Thailand today is about this size, the size that it was in America in 1950. Okay? So yes, they're getting more efficient. Now you can imagine if they basically had a refrigerator like the size of Thailand or something, this blue line would be way down here, because you wouldn't have to have refrigerators that were enough to feed a family of 20 for 4 people. Okay, and this just shows what you can do with like product labeling in the marketplace. In Korea, these are 3 products over a 7-year period. It basically can reduce the average efficiency of appliances by 30 to 40% quite easily. There's no consumers are not freezing in the dark. Everyone's comfortable. Products deliver the same services. Okay, so Thailand did a number of things, has done a number of things over the last 15 years. And one of them is they got together with the 5 manufacturers of La Palm, which are the basically the long fluorescents which are hidden back here. So they used to be fat, and then they got thinner. And they did this. They saved about almost one of the power plants is from changing these lamps, and this was voluntary. Okay. And there was no impact. The light still gave out the same amount of light. You use less glass, less phosphor. The lamp is thinner. And so they did this with some very clever marketing. They had stars, Dara, and going out and lots of really clever marketing on TV, and to get consumers to accept this. And so they've also done a lot of labeling. And the label. I think most of you, if you've ever been shopping here, Chalak Basi Baha. So Chalak Baha, label number 5, means you have the most efficient. So, and this has become, in fact, I'll tell a quick story. So I did my dissertation on consumer behavior and energy labeling. And I compared the Thai energy label to the US energy label, which was designed by economists. And the Thai energy label was much, much better. The U.S. label, about 1/3 of the consumers actually misunderstood. They interpreted it backwards. Not only was it boring, but they interpreted it backwards. The Thai label is very good because it's easy to understand that you're getting better by going on a numerical system. So these are all the products that are labeled. And I won't go into this because we don't have time, but Thailand has had a number of very innovative ways of funding things through the oil fund, and they have soft loan programs. They have a revolving fund for factories and buildings that goes through the banks. It's a model around the world. Okay, so this is actually the same power plant 5 times. I cheated. This is just to give you an idea. This is the headquarters of EGAT in Nonthaburi. And so 2,600 peak megawatts is how much has been saved through all these programs. So one of these plants is about 500 megawatts. Okay? So as we sit here today, about 5% of all the electricity flowing around all over the country is megawatts. And what that means is that if Thailand had not done these things, we would be using 5% more electricity and have 5 more of these plants spewing pollution into the air. So I think Thailand is probably a leader in the region in this aspect of policy through the efforts of Dr. B.S. Sawat, and who was one of the pioneers, and then the people who followed him to have very good policies in place. So this is the cost of producing a kilowatt of electricity, of capacity, building capacity, and producing the electricity. And what this shows on the right side here, these are all sources of energy supply like wind farms, biomass, biogas. So these all are more expensive. The least expensive sources are energy efficiency. And they're so cheap that they cost about 1/3 to 1/4 as much as it costs to build a power plant. This is based on actual data, so I don't have to show data from the US. Actually, Thailand has already done it. Okay? So this is evidence that energy efficiency should be the first fuel. In other words, before you build more power plants, you should build more efficient refrigerators, more efficient buildings, more efficient factories. So, can we do this? Okay. Now, all of these countries have set targets for energy efficiency. So we thought about, we were doing some work for Asian Development Bank last year. We thought, how do we figure out what the potential is? So we said, it's really hard because there's just so many decisions that people can make in different sectors. So we said, we took the target, okay? And so Thailand has a target to reduce energy intensity by 25% compared to business as usual by 2030. We took the target and then we assumed a cost of saved energy. It's pretty easy to do that. We know from this chart that I just showed you, we know approximately what it costs to save a unit of energy. Then we said, what is the investment required to meet that target? Okay, and we came up with a very big number, which is $944 billion by 2020. Now, you can laugh because countries don't meet their targets. They don't care anyway. It's just a policy. Who cares? But even if they only get halfway there, that's $500 billion worth of investment. And remember, I told you earlier, the rate of investment is about 1/5 to 1/10 of what it needs to be. So this is what, this is just gives you a rough idea. The Thailand figure is about $2 billion. So that equates to about $200 million a year being spent on energy efficiency, which I don't think Thailand is near that level. They spend about probably maybe $40 million a year. So they need to increase the level of spending by about 5-fold. But they're on the way. So, how do we, just some thoughts about how we get beyond seeing this as just a personal virtue that's nice to do, and how we actually make this into something that's viable. And so the policy drivers, there are policy drivers, and these are important, and these should be seized and enhanced. Cost of oil imports is something very important. Competitiveness will be really important, especially when the ASEAN market opens. Climate change is a driver, but it's more a driver for the guilty ones like me from the US who've been spewing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere for years. It's not such a driver. It's becoming more of a driver for countries in Asia because of the environmental impacts. But it's less of a driver than oil imports. And then, okay, you have to figure out, okay, how do you monetize energy efficiency as a resource? And one of the policies that's actually in the 20-year plan is called a feed-in tariff. So who knows, raise your hand if you know what a feed-in tariff is. Okay. A feed-in tariff, it says that if a generator has a renewable energy plant and they basically put up the plant and connect it to the grid, the EGAT or the Thai government will pay them a certain amount per kilowatt hour produced. Okay? So typically the feed-in tariffs for solar or wind or biomass are in the range of somewhere, say, 4 to 10 baht per kilowatt hour. So if I have a plant, that's how much I can get. Okay? We know that you can produce energy efficiency for about 1 to 2 baht. Okay? So Thailand is spending trillions of baht per year, at least hundreds of billions of baht per year on feed-in tariffs for renewables. And they're saying, okay, well, why don't we have a feed-in tariff for energy efficiency to make it simple? If you make it simple, you make it standardized. If you make it standardized, bankers can understand it. And that's very important because that means that they will loan to the factory or the building for this investment. And this is there was a workshop a couple of days ago. This is going to happen. It's extremely exciting. Okay? It gets around a lot of the uncertainty about, oh, will this project save energy and how much will I get? You know you will get a fixed amount. So there's lots of activity in Thailand. There's energy service companies. There's about probably 15 or 20, maybe 5 that are active. There's some very interesting insurance products because it's a really good insurance bet. You basically insure the value of the investment, and there's very little risk. There's also performance guarantees and innovative financing mechanisms. So that's just a quick tour of the horizon of energy efficiency, which until recently no one gave a damn about, but people are starting to get interested. And I'm glad you came today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Now I'd like to welcome one question per person from the floor. And please keep it really short. If you have further questions, you can talk to Peter afterwards. So, Rachel?
Thank you for a great presentation. I have a comment and a question. The comment is, I disagree that energy efficiency is boring, especially after your presentation and especially after looking at cost savings. Even in the States a few years ago when the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act was implemented, hundreds of millions of dollars went to energy efficiency programs around the entire United States, and that's not including the billions that went to renewables. We won't talk about Solyndra. So it's the comment. My question is, though, with a lot of the energy efficiency mechanisms, in particular and most simply, changing to compact fluorescent light bulbs or CFLs, what is your response on the mercury waste that's produced
a good
by?
Question. So there's actually a small amounts of mercury in all lamps, not just CFLs. The total amount of mercury in all the lamps in the world is about the size of a rugby ball. And we've done some analysis of this. There's not enough mercury to have a significant health impact. In fact, the amount of mercury coming out of coal-powered power plants is about 10 times higher. Now, that's not sitting in a product in your house, so that's the problem. So it's really the other answer, which is a little bit less tongue-in-cheek, or a little bit more caring answer and proactive, is they can produce the same lamps with a lot less mercury. And so until a few years ago, there used to be 10 or 15 micrograms per lamp, and now they're down to about 2. So that's the best way to do it is through reducing the amount that you put in the lamp. So if your baby or you maybe you have an extra drink and you drop your CFL and it crashes on the floor, you don't need to call the health department. You just sweep it up and throw it away. Seriously.
Given your expertise in energy efficiency, I was wondering if you might be aware of and contrast 2 models of electricity regulation. One that was extremely successful but completely abandoned in California, the integrated resource model, where publicly owned utilities and heavily regulated utilities did exactly what you proposed. They started cutting, increasing efficiency and cutting waste, and they were hugely successful. But that successful model was supplanted by this market fundamentalist deregulatory model, which introduces all sorts of uncertainty and risk into the power pool and doesn't deliver on lower costs or necessarily energy efficiency, particularly as it was initially implemented in California. Do you ever wonder whether the move toward deregulation and market restructuring is the right move, or are the risks so great in terms of price stability and system reliability that a more regulated model might further the objectives of energy efficiency? So it's integrated resource management versus the market fundamentalist, let the markets decide. Do you have any?
Can I answer that? Yes. No, you're right. With an integrated utility, it's much easier to do, and you can have a plan, and the plan is implemented by that utility, which not only generates but transmits and goes to the end customer, and it works better. But I think, so the problem was they went to unbundling and deregulation without proper regulation in place, and there were many papers that were written which would forecast that you will get less investment in efficiency, you will have there will be negative impacts. So what's happening in California, they now have something called a loading order, and they basically, the top priority loading order is energy efficiency investment. So they're coming around, getting the regulations in place. It took 5 or 10 years to correct that problem. But yes, if you deregulate without having a strong basis for investing in new resources and a plan for promoting energy efficiency, then you will destroy it, which is what happened. It didn't destroy it. It went down from like 1.6 billion to like 500 million, and now it's up to like 2.5. It's up. I forget what it is in the U.S. It's much higher than it was. So it's gone back in the right direction after a correction.
I see. Member of Parliament, you are too kind to Thailand. You are not critical. I'm here to hear criticism. Because I was on the Energy Policy Committee of the government for 3 years. There was no feeling at all of progress and success on the efficiency. And at the moment, whether one looks at EGAT or PTT, I think they are destroying the country. Not the other way around. So what is the true story, and what would be your recommendation for us to improve on the policy direction and the performances? Thank you.
Yeah. So you caught me out. I was giving my polite speech that I don't get my work permit revoked. I agree with you that Thailand could do a lot more, and I have a few comments about what